And they announced on Tuesday that they had to, quote, depopulate, which is really just a nice way of saying kill, 1.6 million laying hens and 337,000 pullets at their facility in Texas alone.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. So it seems the world did not come to an end because I still have internet access and we're still able to record this podcast. But how was the eclipse on your end?
In Florida, it was pretty non-eventful. I stayed inside, but my husband went out and he was going to watch it and didn't really see anything, so he was very disappointed. But I saw all kinds of videos on TikTok. I saw like one video was really cool because it almost looked like for just a split second there was like an eye, like the sun like made this like crazy like detailed eye image, which was really cool.
Was
There were
it
other
like
people,
was
huh?
it like Lord of the Rings style?
I don't know. I never saw that movie.
Oh. Oh yeah, there's this whole like thing with the eye and it's like a glowing
It was glowing.
it
Like it was
yeah.
beautiful. I mean, it didn't look like scary. It was like it looked really cool though. Um and then there were people that caught glimpses of the rockets going up. There was someone else that caught a laser, like a red laser, and they were like, "What is this?" And I still don't know what it is. No one seemed to like have an answer to that. Um, but you want to know something interesting that I
Yeah.
learned? So I was on TikTok and some lady in Tennessee was like, "Yeah, so I have CERN here, as everyone knows. So everyone in my town is like leaving town for the eclipse because of what CERN is doing." And I'm like, "What? Like CERN's not in Tennessee. It's in Switzerland." Well, it turns out there are like little baby CERNs all over the United States. There's like a whole bunch of them. And I mean, they don't have like the big, huge Hadron Collider, but they're doing like smaller scaled things throughout the United States. And I don't know how I did not know this because we've researched CERN like so much, but I don't know how I feel about that. I don't really feel very comfortable about that.
Maybe that's why we're having earthquakes in New York.
That could be. That could be. There's no telling.
Well, all right. So, as I said, clearly the world did not come to an end. But
Yet.
today,
No, I'm just kidding.
yet, today we are going to talk about another possibility of a plandemic. Okay. So, this may seem like it doesn't make sense, but we'll wrap it all up together at the end. So, what have you been seeing in the news for the past week or so? Maybe like 2 weeks now. All of these articles about this rapidly evolving strain of H5N1, otherwise known as the bird flu. So, we've had bird flu outbreaks before, but this is reportedly like the worst outbreak in American history. And like I said, it's evolving rapidly. If you go to the CDC website, you can see all this updated data on where all the bird flu cases are. And so far, there have been 1,116 outbreaks currently impacting 48 states. So that was as of when I looked yesterday. And the only two states that haven't seen any cases yet are Hawaii and Louisiana. Other than that, the rest of the US is being impacted. And what's more alarming is the virus is spreading beyond birds. So, my conspiracy brain says, what better way to create a pandemic that simultaneously impacts our food supply than to introduce a sickness that affects poultry, livestock, and now humans, right?
And
Because
the fact
tradition
that it's spreading to humans, I mean, doesn't that just ring a bell, like maybe gain of function research Ding, ding, ding.
Exactly. Exactly. Because traditionally it's only been poultry. And like you guys may remember, there was this outbreak of bird flu back in 2022. And we talked about this on one of our podcasts. It impacted over 82 million chickens. And I was reading this article in Delish, and it was saying that so far this year alone, nearly 2.5 million birds from both commercial and backyard flocks have been infected. And here's where, to me, this gets interesting. So, the Department of Agriculture has confirmed outbreaks in dairy cows in 6 states. And this marks the first time that bird flu has ever been identified in cattle. So, as of this week, there are over 16 herds of dairy cattle across 6 states. So, it's Texas, Idaho, Kansas, Ohio, Michigan, and New Mexico, where cattle herds have all tested positive for bird flu. And then there's another herd in Iowa that's suspected to be infected, but they're still waiting for USDA lab results. So, the Texas Department of State Health Services told the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota last week that 3 cats have also been found to have gotten infected on farms. And there are dead wild birds that have been found at some farms. And a couple weeks ago, the virus also reportedly spread to goats. So on March 20th, the Minnesota Board of Animal Health reported that there were goats on a farm where they had like a backyard poultry flock that was positively infected with the virus, and then the goats got infected. And then last Monday, the Texas Department of State Health Services reported that an employee from one of the dairy farms where cows were infected also contracted the virus. So this is a red flag because it's only the second ever case to be found in humans in the United States. And this is the first time that a human has gotten bird flu from a cow. So the first case was back in 2022 in Colorado, and that guy was a poultry worker. And while the virus hasn't been fatal to humans yet in the United States, there is one case in Vietnam last month where a man died from the bird flu. And the CDC is reporting that human infections have a fatality rate of over 50%. But at the same time, they're saying that the human health risk is low.
Okay, I don't think I'm the only one that thinks the CDC is full of shit. Like, how are we going to take anything they say or any of these health agencies say seriously after what they did with COVID? And this is exactly how COVID started. Remember, they said it was like a platypus or some like crazy like thing from like a market, and that's how everyone got sick. And now we know, like, no, it did happen in a lab and it was gain of function. And so if multiple different species, including humans and goats and cats, are getting it, hello, like gain of function. And
Yep.
we're still doing that. We never cut the funding. We're still sending funding to the Wuhan lab for gain of function. So I really tried, Tara. I tried taking this episode seriously, but all I kept finding were articles from like the CDC and, NBC News. And I just don't believe anything they say. But something interesting that I think gives us a unique perspective is we have this podcast where we're able to very clearly see patterns, right? Like we didn't have that benefit with COVID, but I see a pattern happening 100%. And it sort of clicked more when I heard you talking. If it's going to all these different animals, there could be another common denominator. Okay. And so remember like a while back when the bird flu was first being talked about, I think you said 2022, and they were talking about it in chickens, and it was like why they had to kill like millions of chickens. In addition, by the way, to the cow and chicken farms that were mysteriously blown up or lit on
Right.
fire. So this was in addition to that to kill more chickens. Um, and then what we found were all of these small farmers and people that had like chickens in their backyard. They were posting videos all over the internet saying, my chickens had these symptoms. They stopped laying eggs. But the moment I switched their feed and stopped feeding them the certain brand of feed, they went right back to normal. And all the symptoms went away and they started to lay eggs again. And we were like, oh my God, it's in the feed. So that would explain how multiple animals could get this because I don't want to say I don't know if I should say the name, Tara, of the brand, but it's like a very popular brand of feed that
It
very
was
like
out there. It was out there on the media. I
Purina.
mean,
Okay, it was
yeah.
Purina. And so like they produce dog food, like they produce everything. And so could it be like in the feed? I mean, I don't know, but I would believe that before I believe the CDC because they can no longer be trusted. So I'm just going to call it, you already called it. This is a plandemic, 100%.
Yes. And I want you guys to know this is not just confined to America. So I went down the rabbit hole over the last 2 days looking up every article I could find. So I'm referencing like 15 different articles here
You
in my
did so much
research.
research. I did like nothing for this episode. This is all you. Good job.
Well, because I'm kind of fascinated by how this is evolving. So, the Jerusalem Post reported on Monday that the virus has infected tens of millions of birds and thousands of mammals worldwide. And like I said, this is the first time that it has spread to cows and goats. So, you've got scientists who've been tracking the avian flu for years. And they're all expressing how they're confused by how the virus has spread in cattle populations. They don't know if it's directly from the birds or whether it's like spreading through the air or if cows are becoming infected from touching contaminated surfaces like milking machines. Like nobody knows. So the director of the UW Center for One Health Research, his name is Dr. Peter Rabinowitz, and he recently told NPR, he said, quote, "We are in fairly unprecedented, uncharted territory globally in relationship to the avian influenza," end quote. And then this guy, Dr. Florian Kramer, is a virologist at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York. And he said, quote, "There are a lot of questions and so far not a lot of answers," end quote. So, outbreaks of avian flu have recently spread to Antarctica for the first time ever. Now, Antarctica is a super remote area, right? It has natural barriers that separate it from other countries. But in Antarctica, bird flu has killed not only birds, like multiple species of birds, but also penguins and elephant seals. And then
And it's a
I read an
place no
article,
one's allowed to visit unless you're like a
right?
scientist.
Exactly. And I read an article in Nature that said the virus has also spread to bears, I think in Australia. And according to the World Organization for Animal Health, as of the end of March, there are 485 bird species and 37 mammal species that have been infected with bird flu since 2021. And there's only 3 places in the world where the virus has not yet found its way, and that's the Pacific Islands, Australia, and New Zealand. So I guess the bears were not in Australia. I don't know where they were. So anyway, this organization reported that, quote, "The loss of wildlife at the current scale presents an unprecedented risk of wildlife population collapse, creating an ecological crisis," end quote. And while the CDC doesn't seem to be super concerned, one expert, Dr. Mark Siegel, he's a medical correspondent for Fox News, and he's like sounding the alarm because he's saying that this could develop into a pandemic 100 times worse than COVID. And then I read this article in express.com where back in 2019, while doing pandemic research, there was a group of scientists at the University of Wisconsin-Madison that created a bird flu virus with increased threat to humans. Again, gain of function research, and reportedly this study was criticized for being a safety breach because researchers allegedly try to downplay the event and like notifying health authorities and overseeing bodies, whatever that means. And these mutations haven't shown up in any of the recent infections, but clearly the potential is there. And there's this guy, Daniel Goldfield. He's an evolutionary virologist at the Royal Veterinary College in Hatfield, UK. And he said that even though the threat to humans is currently low, viruses are, quote, surprising, and we don't know what they'll do next. And he said that the more like mammal species that get infected by the virus, the more opportunities it has to evolve into a strain that's dangerous to humans.
I would love to hear what Rand Paul thinks of this because he was like the expert on gain of function and caught Fauci, by the way. Like, I mean, he's the one that uncovered it. Everyone said he was crazy. I've got to find some clips and we have to do a follow-up episode because he's going to be all over this. And it's weird that Antarctica has bird flu. And like, whenever I hear Antarctica, my crazy conspiracy brain just is like on high alert. So listen to that. I've been waiting to talk about this, by the way, on the podcast. I just had to find the right time. But last year, scientists found what they're calling a quote zombie virus that has been frozen for nearly 50,000 years. And another interesting fact, and I think pretty much everyone knows about this because of the Joe Rogan episode that they did on it, but they're reintroducing woolly mammoths to Siberia. Like they are creating woolly mammoths, like they're
Like Jurassic Park.
yes, like literally like Jurassic Park, taking DNA and like reintroducing it. And then also you hear of flowers blooming in Antarctica, which is a sign that there's things that are defrosting. And so they're expecting more zombie viruses to be discovered. And that's the thing with these woolly mammoths is like they will dig in the ground in Siberia and all sorts of things can come up that have been like lying dormant. And apparently they've found 20 superbugs so far up there or down there, wherever that are resistant to antibiotics. And what they're saying is that they have the ability to transfer that resistance to other microorganisms. And I'm just like, okay, let's just use some critical thinking skills here for a second. Wouldn't you think that after the first like zombie virus superbug discovery, that you'd be like, yeah, we probably shouldn't defrost anything else. Like maybe we should just leave nature alone. No, they keep freaking finding more stuff. And I'm just like, why? Because it's going to end up in the hands of some crazy scientist like Fauci, and all of a sudden antibiotics won't work. So I think the bird flu is like the least of our worries, especially since Antarctica is involved. Um, and also I found an article and then I tried finding it again and it like disappeared, I swear. But it was like a reputable source. I mean, it was some main news outlet, and they were saying that it's nothing to worry about, and that the bird flu is treated with like vaccines we already have and like medications we already have. Or is it like, is it going to be resistant like these superbugs that they keep discovering in Antarctica rather than just leaving them alone? So I think this is all manufactured. I think they're creating a crisis.
Okay, and now you have me thinking like, okay, you have all this stuff going on in Antarctica and you have bird flu in Antarctica and all these migratory birds that can then pick up these other superbugs that they're like finding in Antarctica and then carry them to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Why? Like, why are we doing this? I mean, like, don't even get me started. Rand Paul, I got to find a rant from him because he like always says it best.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's transition to how this is impacting our food supply. Because what happens when poultry gets infected with the virus? They get euthanized so they can minimize the spread of illness. Like, remember when the bird flu hit in 2022 and they killed millions of chickens? Well, what happened? This also led to increased poultry prices because there was a lack of available supply. Like, remember, Stephanie, a carton of eggs was like insanely priced. It was like
Yeah, and the
six,
prices
seven
like
dollars.
never really came fully down here. And same with chicken. Like you try and buy chicken wings, no, like you can't afford them. That used to be the cheapest thing. Now you can't buy them.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Bidenomics.
I'll stop getting us off track. Go ahead.
But the same thing is happening again right now. So you've got egg producers that are being forced to kill millions of chickens to try and contain this virus. So we're starting to see prices go up again. There's one company called Calmaine Foods, and it's the largest producer of fresh eggs in the United States. They have um, plants and factories all over the country. And they announced on Tuesday that they had to, quote, depopulate, which is really just a nice way of saying kill, 1.6 million laying hens and 337,000 pullets at their facility in Texas alone as a precaution. So there's a local radio station in El Paso, Texas, and they reported this morning that Dr. Tom Fullerton, he's an economics professor at the University of Texas at El Paso, and he said so far bird flu has made an approximate $150,000 impact. So consumers aren't really feeling the hit yet. But if these outbreaks continue, it's estimated that a minimum of $4 billion loss could be felt across the country. And again, at this point, we don't even know how many cattle herds and poultry flocks have been infected. And the disease is spreading so rapidly that we have no idea what the impact on prices for like chicken and eggs and beef are going to be. And then what about milk and dairy products? So the FDA and the USDA, neither of which I trust, says that the pasteurization process destroys bird flu viruses in milk and dairy products, and there's no reason to be concerned. There's no risk to consumers, but they're also warning against drinking unpasteurized or raw milk. And then I was reading this article in Audacity where unpasteurized milk from sick cattle has been collected at two different farms in Kansas and then one in Texas. And the CDC is reporting that they all tested positive. And then, despite saying that pasteurized products are safe, the USDA also stated last week that this is a quote, rapidly evolving situation, end quote. So I don't know about you, Stephanie, but that doesn't exactly sound comforting to me.
No. And like I read that too, that you should only drink pasteurized milk because that would kill the virus. And then they're also saying, like, if you cook your meat and eggs, like you're supposed to cook them fully, like it would kill the virus. So that if that's the case, like, why are they killing millions of chickens? And then
Right.
have they tried swapping out the feed first to see if like the chickens get better? Because I go back to what we uncovered with that. And I find it interesting that at a time when like homesteading and owning chickens and drinking raw milk has become this like super popular trend, we all of a sudden have this new fear unlocked that raw milk and chickens are dangerous. And I think this could possibly be something to put a stop to the trend of people becoming self-sustainable. I mean, I don't know about you, but every time I go online, there's people talking about the chickens they bought for their backyard.
Mhm.
So they have their own eggs and things like that.
I I was planning to do that before we ended up moving overseas. Like I
Yeah.
was getting chickens.
My parents, we talk about that like every day. We're like, we need to move somewhere where we can have chickens. And I mean, here it's like they have all this fear unlocked. And I am sorry, I don't know if you can hear my kids in the background. If you can, I apologize. I just tune it out, but they're being very loud. Um,
I
So
can't.
I don't believe anything they tell us, like especially when we know that the vegan bug eating agenda people like Bill Gates are the ones that are out there buying up all this farmland. Like they know people are never going to voluntarily go along with that agenda and eat bugs. So there has to be a way to take out cows and chickens, which are the options that most Americans choose, right? Or to make it just so insanely expensive that no one can afford to eat meat or consume dairy anymore. And I follow this Instagram account. It's called Life by Thor. Really, really good account. And he has this theory that they push the vegan agenda to keep the population weak and sick. And I noticed this a few years back when I got like super into all these health podcasts. And I noticed they had a lot of vegan people that would go and do interviews on those podcasts. And I am not even kidding. Like every single vegan person had some mysterious autoimmune disease, every single one of them. And I remember thinking, like, maybe that's like a commonality among vegan people. So, anyhow, like, this has become something a lot of people like this guy Thor have paid attention to, where they went from being vegan to being like almost on this like carnivore diet where they're all about consuming meat because it gives you all the essential vitamins and minerals that your body can easily absorb and process, unlike plants. Where it takes a different like pathway or whatever. And then a lot of the plants are deficient in essential nutrients like B12 and certain fatty acids like omega-3 and omega-6. So, long story short, like human beings are meant to eat meat. And there is this agenda that's constantly trying to stop that and like turn us all into vegans. And where else in our food chain are we trying to alter the natural food habits of animals? It's like this is not normal. It's not natural. I feel like we're disrupting nature. in the food chain. And I firmly believe that this is part of this whole global agenda. I think that it's part of the plan to get complete control of the food system. I mean, we've talked at length on this podcast about how many big corporations already control the food system. And I guarantee that this is going to put like farmers and ranchers out of business. I mean, you just said, I thought that they had to kill thousands. I didn't realize they had to kill millions of chicken and now cattle, if it's spreading to cattle. And I think it will scare people into not buying chickens and to stop this trend of like raw milk and eating more meat instead of going vegan. And last but not least, I'm sure that there will be some kind of vaccine that will come out that'll be the only thing that will protect you from this strain of bird flu. And it's going to be pushed, just like the COVID vaccine, to make more profit for the elites in power. And not to mention, like, think about Bill Gates, these people that are heavily invested in the consumption of bugs and lab created meat. They're going to be the ones that see a huge profit from us not eating meat. So, like, you got to ask, like, who benefits from this? People like Bill Gates, for sure. And then another interesting fact I found when I was researching the bird flu impact on American farms is, quote, the USDA has spent more than $1 billion to compensate farmers for lost flocks and to suppress the spread of the viral disease. And this is according to the Food and Environmental Reporting Network. Well, guess where that $1 billion comes from? From us, the taxpayers. We are paying for it. And who are we paying? Well, we know that most farms in America have been bought up by huge corporations. And who are those owned by? They're owned by BlackRock and Vanguard. So our tax dollars are going right back into the pockets of the rich elites for a disease or a virus that I think is manufactured. So like there's absolutely a profit in this disease and in pushing it and in its spreading. And let's not forget that these same investors that are invested in these farms are also the same investors that are invested in pharmaceutical companies that push the vaccines that fix the problem. So I think they'll do anything for profit. I think that they manufacture a crisis so that they can then sell you the solution. And I'm just not going to buy into the fear of bird flu. I'm not going to buy it again. I think this is COVID all over. And I think that everyone needs to wake up and like not buy into the fear that the media is going to start pushing.
Yeah, this is definitely in my mind related to the global plan to control our food supply. And here's the part that kind of set off my alarm bells, right? Okay, unlike COVID and then all the evolving strains and these other viruses that they've tried to push in the MSM since COVID, like the CDC doesn't seem to be concerned about this. So on one hand, it makes sense because there have only been a couple cases of human infection, but at the same time, like the virus has been confined to birds for years. Now it's spreading globally at an alarming rate, and it's impacting animals that were never infected in the past. And now we have humans being infected, but reportedly, there's no evidence that the virus can spread from human to human. But then it was never supposed to be able to spread from birds to mammals or from animals to people. So, what's really going on here? And it makes me question the motive because, like you said, vaccination. This is the perfect opportunity for yet another vaccination that can be pushed on the public with fear culture about a tainted food supply. And, scientists and researchers and experts are saying that the virus continues to like evolve, not just in America, but globally, because as I talked about earlier, wild birds migrate and they can carry strains of the virus all over the world. So last Wednesday, the European Food Safety Authority issued an alert about how the new strains of bird flu could potentially cause a danger to humans in the future. And they said, quote, If avian A, H5N1, influenza viruses acquire the ability to spread efficiently among humans, large scale transmission could occur due to the lack of immune defenses against H5 viruses in humans. Key options for actions include enhancing surveillance targeting humans and animals, ensuring rapid access to rapid diagnostics, promoting collaboration between animals and human sectors, and implementing preventative measures such as vaccination, end quote. Okay, enhanced surveillance targeting humans and animals, Stephanie, and preventative measures such as vaccination. Vaccination for who? For us human beings or for the animals that are our food source? Because either way, the first place my brain goes is what a perfect way to introduce yet another means of population control by vaccination. And so far, the symptoms in humans are said to be ranging from like mild symptoms with like eye infections or upper respiratory illness to severe illness like pneumonia. And then obviously we've had at least one death. And so, like I said earlier, the CDC said the death rate is over 50%. And then last week, Fox News reported that a microbiologist infection control specialist from Toronto, Dr. Erica Susky, reported that while bird flu has a 60% fatality rate in humans, even though it currently doesn't transmit easily from person to person, the primary concern is that the influenza virus is, quote, excellent at mutating and recombining. If there are repeated contacts between species that are the natural reservoir for one type of influenza strain, like birds and H5N1 and humans, the changes of this novel strain adapting to spread in the different species increases. And there are more cases of H5N1, there are more chances for a crossover event into humans, end quote. And then she emphasizes how the biggest sources of spread, not just industrial agriculture, but modern cities. So while this isn't a significant risk for humans right now, I just feel like this is a perfect opportunity for the global elites to use the virus to create a pandemic that impacts not just humans, but also our food supply. And frankly, our food supply is the ultimate means of population control.
Yeah, and let's not forget, like, this is happening, a few months before the biggest elections, because there's so
Yep.
many in the world. It's like,
Yep.
and this reminds me so much of COVID. It's almost like a soft launch. The media starts bringing it up and it's like, oh, don't really worry. Like, it's in China. And here they're saying, oh, don't really worry. It's not affecting that many people. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh my God, it's here and it's everywhere and people are getting sick and you got to lock down. Like it seems like so planned and like such a repeat of COVID. And it's almost like, is it a test? Are they trying to test us to see how we'll react after, this happened? And then I don't know how they can say like a death rate or a fatality rate of like 50 or 60% when not that many humans have even had it. So it's like,
Right.
like who knows the age of these people, comorbidities. Like I think that's really jumping to conclusions and I think it's
Well,
a
I
panic button.
guess I guess if two people get infected, well, now it's three, but if two people had been infected and one of them dies, there's your 50%
Yeah,
mortality rate.
right, exactly. And that person could have been like elderly, like who knows, but I think they're planting the seed. I think this is like exactly how COVID started and they're going to try to pull some fear tactics to gain control, not just of the food system, but of us. And in a election year, I'm just not buying it. And I think everyone should really think twice before you buy into the fear that's going to be pushed. And I bet it's coming. Like we'll have to do a follow-up episode because I bet in another month or two, like this will be headlines that they're talking about every single day on every news network. So we'll see.
You will see.
And I also think that they should just stop at Antarctica. Just stop. Just we don't need to keep digging, okay? So anyhow, I hope that that sort of gives everyone like um a filter to look through when the media starts pushing this and just know that I think it's all manufactured and I don't think that we should go along with any lockdowns again or any vaccines or anything that they try to push with this. So everyone have a great week, and we're still here. Nothing bad happened with the eclipse. It's going to be a good week. Okay. We're all okay. No one has to worry. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.